talking The Call. This one is directed by Timothy Woodward Jr. and stars genre legends Tobin Bell and Lin Shaye as a married couple who own this care home, kind of like a child care home, that sort of thing. And they are menaced by a group of teenagers who kind of think these people are kind of crazy, spooky old couple, and they harass them and throw stones through their windows and such. And we have this group of teenagers, and there's this new guy that's kind of just lumped in with their kind of like their gang. And ultimately, these kind of forces are going to butt heads. Now, one day, things go too far, and we find out that Lin Shaye's character commits suicide. And obviously, the kind of like these kind of teenagers are kind of, oh my, are we going to get blamed for this? However, things take an unexpected turn when these teenagers are invited to the house by Tobin Bell, the late husband, and they are read the will where they are each allowed to have $100,000, and all they've got to do to earn that is essentially go into a room on their own, make a call to someone, and if they can stay on the line for a minute, they'll get this $100,000. And of course, that's what happens. However, there may be a little bit more going on. And this line is possibly a line to the dead in the fact that it's Lin Shaye's dead wife on the other end of the phone. Now, let's talk about what works. Now, I think the thing for me here is seeing Tobin Bell and Lin Shaye to a degree on screen. But Tobin Bell, I have to say, is effortlessly watchable. And I have to say, he is very much channeling his kind of Jigsaw character here. In fact, there's actually just a variation on some of the kind of the dialogues from the Saw films in like, do you want to play a game sort of style kind of sort of dialogue that he has with these kind of like these teenagers and stuff like that. Admittedly, it's somewhat derivative, but nonetheless, it's still kind of fun hearing those kind of like that kind of style of dialogue in the kind of a horror film. And although those scenes aren't particularly long with either Lin Shaye or Tobin Bell, they don't have a huge amount of screen time. I did enjoy them on screen quite a lot. And it's kind of nice to see these two horror icons as kind of like a married couple. That was quite fun. Now, the idea here is kind of what you would say, and maybe like a high concept idea. Someone's had an idea, all right, here's an idea for a horror film. They're on the phone, and that line, is a line to the dead. And when you go on this phone, you kind of are having to face your worst fears. Now let's write a film around that. And I have a feeling that's what happens. And the movie is set in the 80s, and there are some kind of like some neat 80s aesthetics, the kind of the VHS kind of style intro, some of the kind of the synthy dialogue and the kind of this fashion are all quite fun. It never really completely sold me on the fact that this was in the 80s, to be honest with you. But there are some elements here and there that I kind of enjoyed, like one of the guys' big dangly earring that you kind of used to wear in the 80s and stuff like that. However, this movie is possibly one of the most generic horror films I've ever seen. This smacks to me like a horror film by committee. Just rolling out all the old tropes and kind of generic kind of teens. Oh look, it's the kind of like the good teen. It's the slutty girl. It's the kind of like the douchey guy. It's the kind of the cowardly guy. Oh look, they got to face their fears. Oh look, all their fears are very low budget and don't require lots of special effects and things like that. Why is it whenever you have one of these films where it's kind of like your fears have come to life, all the fears happen to be like stuff you could do on a really low budget? My fear is sharks. That's not going to work, is it? Anyway, but it's just like lots of cheesy cliche moments. I did not think the characters were particularly good. Our kind of teenage characters are so thinly sketched. The only one to getting a little bit of characterization is our new kid, who is painted to be somewhat more sympathetic and kind of ending up in this group more by just happenstance than kind of any type of malicious. But nonetheless, it's the most generic kind of thinly sketched characters you care about, all going into like one after another. Okay, so I think, well, there's no point even watching the first couple because they're just kind of like cannon fodder setups until the kind of the real sort of story is going to happen kind of later on. And it's just it's just, it's not necessarily bad. It's just really, really obvious, really generic, and not very interesting. That's the thing with this movie. It's not necessarily bad, but it's just so bland. It is just the most bland, you know, cabbage film you can ever imagine, because it's just, it has no real kind of like flair to it at all. It's just generic. This to me seems very much like a paycheck gig for Tobin Bell and Lin Shaye. Lin Shaye just seems to be popping out these kind of horror films left, right and centre. She's got a win late in her career as kind of like a screen queen, and she's going for it. I don't begrudge her that, but the problem is you can oversaturate your market here, and you end up being, you know, a Danny Trejo just churning out these kind of like these trashy B movies, and ultimately, no one's interested in it after too long. So she's got to be careful, I think. So, you know, should you see this movie? I mean, it's one of these just like, oh yeah, they think the idea is really strong, and it's just a very slight variation, kind of having lots of different horror tropes. Oh look, it's a kind of like a spindly kind of like possessed person coming towards you. Oh look, it's the fear of kind of you know, an abusive parent. It's just like, it's not badly done necessarily, but it's so generic. I mean, you can kind of see films and think, oh, they're kind of generic, but I kind of still enjoy it. But there's just no soul in this movie. I don't know how best to really else describe it. It's just very, very dull. No, just boring. I couldn't wait for this movie to end, if I'm honest. That might sound harsh, and I don't think it's a horrible film. That I have seen worse films. The production value isn't bad. You know, the kind of like the location shooting is okay. The set dressing's okay. Our two horror stars are, you know, at least Tobin Bell's interesting to watch. Lin Shaye to me was going through the motions a little bit, but boring. 4 out of 10. I feel like I've hammered this film more than kind of that score may suggest. I don't think it's a horrible film, but it's just so dull. It's like when your parents say to you, I'm disappointed in you, rather than kind of giving you a straight bollocking. 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.